So, hello everyone. I'm Kat Newport, conflict to growth architect, change navigator, and founder of Oculus Inc. I am a former senior level manager with many years of experience in organizational development, change and risk management, training, coaching, and quality assurance. So, for this lunch and learn, feel free to turn off your camera, grab your lunch while I share insights for the next 30 minutes. Once the presentation is done, I will stop the recording so everyone can feel more comfortable and provide you some time to ask questions and engage. So let's jump right into today's topic, which is from bias to belonging, strategies for effective conflict resolution. So I'm going to click my screen. Hey, it's working. Okay, so you're seeing on your screen right now is a QR code for the handout for today's presentation. So if you want to take a moment and give that a snap with your phone, you'll get immediate access to the handout for today's presentation. So if you're not a scribble down notes kind of person, they're all there for you. So what are we going to cover today? We're going to talk about perception and self-reflection quite a bit because that's the first stop on the train of conflict. Effective conflict management strategies will be laced throughout the presentation. I am going to share the social relationship onion diagram with you and how that translates a little bit into bias awareness and risk associated with conflict or confrontation. So hoping y'all had some time to grab yourself a copy of that handout. I'm going to click on to the next screen. So this is possibly a very unpopular opinion, but a very solid way of looking at conflict. When you're in a conflict conversation, 90% of what you perceive to be the conflict is your internal narrative and yours alone. Yet don't yell at me yet. The human brain is very quick and very good at predicting the outcome to situations based on historical experiences. It's a survival mechanism that's built into our base brains. So when you're in a situation and your brain is telling you, "Oh, we've been here before. We're gonna do this because we've had this problem before. This is how we handle it. This is what's going to keep us safe," and it teaches you or it makes you react in a certain way to avoid risks. However, when looking at conflict, if you can hit pause on your automatic reactions for just a moment, because in this day and age, we rarely face life or death fights anymore. There's no lions jumping out of the woods to eat us alive here. And actually evaluate the current situation on its own merits. Your response to the situation is likely to be very different than that first knee-jerk reaction, that narrative. So there's a couple of things I recommend to manage that 90% internal dialogue, that narrative that goes on when you're dealing with conflict. The first one is some self-reflection. Ask yourself, how do I typically approach conflict? Understanding your own conflict management style is the first step to fostering healthy communication. So, good way to do this, grab yourself your journal or a journal and write out how you experience conflict. Consider your initial reactions to conflict, what your typical thought processes are, because we all have that narrative that runs, and how you contributed to the resolution. It'll start to uncover some of those habitual thoughts you have when you jump into a conflict conversation. When conflicts arise in relationships, it's vital to recognize emotion, both your own and theirs. When you take a moment to understand not only your own feelings, but also to try and empathize with the emotions of the other person or people, this sets the stage for a more constructive conversation. This is where that handy dandy journal or some visualization can come into play. Recall a recent conflict and identify, like actually label the emotions you felt. We're very good at feeling them, not so good at naming them a lot of times. So actually put a label on the emotions you felt during that conflict. And then ask yourself how well you understood and acknowledged, there's the word, and acknowledged the emotions of the other person involved. And then think about what you could have done differently to enhance your empathy and emotional awareness. Communication style greatly influence how conflicts unfold and sometimes even how conflicts start. Being aware of whether you tend to be assertive or passive when you communicate, loud or quiet, empathetic or stoic, and adjust your approach based on the situation. This can make a significant difference when you're resolving conflict issues. So think about your default communication style in personal conflicts. I'm a little bit loud. I'm a little bit stoic. I'm a little bit direct. Are you more passive or assertive? Consider a recent conflict. Reflect on how adjusting your communication style might have led to a more positive interaction or just a different interaction. So, from talking and communication to the most important piece of communication, active listening is not just that cornerstone for effective conflict resolution, it is fundamental to effective communication in general. Making a conscious effort to truly listen to the other person without interjecting or planning your response, no scripting, fosters a sense of being heard and understood. So again, take a think back into the last conflict you had. Okay. How actively were you listening when the other person started to speak? Or did you get sucked into that trap of, oh yeah, just wait till they breathe. I'm going to jump in there and I'm going to jump down their throats because I have something really good to say. Okay. Were you truly present in the moment? Or were you already formulating your response? Challenge yourself to improve your active listening skills to enhance your conflict conversations. When conflicts arise, shifting the focus from assigning blame, this is all your fault, to seeking a solution, how do we move forward from here, can be very, very helpful. This collaborative approach, where both parties are actively working together to find resolutions, strengthens the foundations for the relationship and actually can bring that conflict to a close much, much quicker. So, again, I encourage you to think back on recent conflicts and assess whether your focus was on assigning blame or finding solutions. Consider adopting a solution oriented mindset in an upcoming conflict, because for as long as there are two people in a room, there'll eventually be a conflict, and brainstorm potential collaborative resolutions. Effective conflict management in personal relationships involves self awareness, emotional intelligence, adaptable communication, active listening, and a solution oriented mindset. By incorporating these considerations, we can navigate conflicts in a way that strengthens rather than strains your personal connections, both personally and professionally. The social relationship onion diagram. I love onion diagrams. I don't know, I like diagrams in general. This diagram is helpful when thinking about different components of conflict and relationship management. For example, when you think of this diagram and try to apply it to personal boundaries, there'll be things that you do with your intimate relationships that you would never do with your barista. Setting priorities. Those in the acquaintance circle will get ideally less of your time and effort than those in your intimate circle. From a communication strategy standpoint, it's helpful to set limits on what topics or the depth of topics you will share with each level. For example, you'll discuss recovery from surgery in depth with intimate relationships, possibly even showing them your scars, but simply say you're doing better with acquaintances. Right? Networking and socializing, how you behave and techniques you use to create connection with intimate relationships is very different from those you use with acquaintances. For example, you are not likely to chug an entire pitcher of beer with the CEO if you're at a work function. You might, no judgment, but it's less likely to happen. And from an emotional well being standpoint, distributing your efforts of connection across the layers provides a sense of belonging and can support your overall well being. Having effective intimate connections, having a good group of acquaintances, having respectful exchanges all encourages that emotional well being. So, intimate relationships, what are they? Well, they encompass family, intimate partners, and close friendships. Conflicts within this circle, the stakes are high. These people are deeply connected to you. And the proximity of these people, you might even live with some of them, um, may remove some inhibitions and potentially escalate situations. What do I mean by that? It's easier to yell at your kid if he's done something to upset you, and you'd yell at your kid, but you'd never yell at your boss if they did the same thing. So that intimate relationship can drop some of those inhibitions. So, from an emotional risk or an emotional perspective, conflicts within intimate relationships carry high emotional stakes due to the deep connections, and the potential impact on the personal well-being is substantial. From a social perspective, the proximity in these relationships can intensify conflicts, removing inhibitions and potentially escalating situations, impacting broader social dynamics. For example, an argument with your mother-in-law has now gone on to your brother and sister-in-law and your cousins, and now, Thanksgiving dinner's a little uncomfortable. So impacting broader social dynamics. Acquaintances, so I'm on the next level up, consist of people you see regularly, but you might not share the same level of trust as intimate relationships. Work relationships and wider social groups fall into this category. Conflicts here might be less risky, but because we usually spend considerable time with some acquaintances, like our colleagues, we spend at least 8 hours a day there, um, this can have a significant personal toll. From an emotional perspective, conflicts with acquaintances may have less emotional risk, but the cumulative impact, because we spend so much time together, especially in work relationships, can take a toll on personal well being. From a social perspective, trust dynamics play a role. Mismanaging conflicts with acquaintances can affect work dynamics or broader social circles. So, if you're having an all out work war with somebody in the next cubicle, that's definitely going to have ripple effects throughout the workplace. Exchange relationships involve brief and shallow interactions, such as with your barista, your doctor, or your bus driver. The personal risk in these conflicts is relatively low, making it easier to mismanage the conflict. Consider observing conflict management styles, like how someone treats a waiter, for insights into their underlying behavior. From an emotional perspective, the personal risk and conflicts in the exchange relationships is relatively low, but mismanagement can still impact your emotional well being. You can never, ever again go to that Starbucks because you really cheesed off the manager. From a social perspective, while conflicts in these interactions may have minimal impact on broader circles, observing someone's conflict management style can provide insights into their overall behavior. For example, we're all told, how does your date treat the wait staff at the restaurant? Because if they're willing to be socially unacceptable, rude, even angry with those staff, it may indicate, future potential issues. Okay. And finally, we talk strangers. Strangers are individuals with whom you have no connection and little to no communication. The perceived risk in these conflicts with strangers usually swings between extremes, from no risk, yeah, whatever, to exaggerated risk. Anticipating violence, for example. Someone cuts you off in traffic, you flip them off. The worst they're going to do is flip you back. Okay, almost no risk. To they're going to pull out a gun and blow my head off. That's an exaggerated risk. Possible, but unlikely. From an emotional perspective, the perceived risk and conflicts with strangers can vary widely depending on the nature of the conflict. And from a social perspective, interactions with strangers, especially in conflict situations, typically have limited social repercussions unless the conflict escalates to public or communal levels. The fight in the parking lot all of a sudden becomes a spectator sport. The journey to effective conflict resolution starts with understanding your self perception and then extending that self perception to the various levels of relationships you have. As we explore these dynamics, as we explore conflict further today, consider how these insights can positively impact your personal and professional interactions. It's crucial to consider not only the emotional toll conflicts take, but also the broader social implications. Understanding the interplay between self-perception, emotions, and social dynamics can profoundly influence how we approach conflicts at different relationship levels. Next one, judgment and labeling. I kind of shove these together because labeling is a type of judgment. We live in a culture of judgment. I'm having a North American perspective here. We live in a culture of judgment. I'm sure it's elsewhere. Um, what is good or bad? What is right or wrong? What's in? What's out? We've been getting this type of messaging since the cradle from our culture, from our social circles, from our religious upbringing, if we had any. The trouble with judgment is it can undermine some of the most important things to us in a workplace or in a social situation, any social situation for that matter. For example, judgment undermines a sense of belonging. If you have been or we have been deemed out or bad, we've been removed psychologically from the group. Further, other in-group members are then socially pressured to maintain the bad person on the outside of the social structures. In severe cases, the undermining of this workplace belonging, this feeling of workplace safety, by using judgment can devolve into shunning and bullying. When we're looking at judgment, this has a huge impact on the sense of self. When presenting our whole authentic self at work or in a social group, and then we are judged for that, our sense of self can feel attacked, causing discomfort and, in severe cases, mental health issues. It also undermines our sense of certainty. If we are judged regularly, we're not sure if we're doing the right thing or the wrong thing. Are we making them happy? Are we not making them happy? And therefore, we're consistently or constantly anxious and under stress, wondering if we're meeting not only the goals of potentially our job, but the goals of social belonging in that situation. There have been numerous studies done on workplaces and what teams perform the best. If you're a big reader, grab yourself copies of HBR. It's almost at every one of them. Teams who feel belonging and are psychologically safe enough in the environment to bring their whole selves to work are more productive. And you can categorically see the impact on the bottom line of the corporation in fiscal returns. It also impacts attrition rates. So from a workplace standpoint, probably in our best interest to build that psychologically safe workplace. When we look at ourselves individually, our biases heavily influence what and how we judge things and people in the workplace and socially. The more you know about what biases you have and how they manifest in your life, the better you'll be able to identify them when they appear spontaneously and then make a different choice. So some common biases you might see cropping up. Number one, confirmation bias. Confirmation bias occurs when you only source information that supports your judgment. You won't Google my point of view to get statistics on my point of view. You'll only Google your point of view to get statistics on your point of view so you can bludgeon me with them. How to manage that? Well, when researching something, try researching an opposing view first. This gives you some perspective and balances out that initial judgment. The Dunning-Kruger effect. People who don't know something very well tend to view it in an overly simplistic way and then be overconfident in their abilities relating to that topic. When experiencing something you're not familiar with, source a subject matter expert and put on your learning hat. For example, I experienced this a lot when I was in the corporate world. I worked in a very niche environment and it was, oh, that's so easy. I don't need you to do it. And then I'd be batting cleanup for 6 months. So that Dunning-Kruger effect. Availability bias. You use information that's easiest to get, or you ask someone for an answer instead of looking it up in the program manual, or you do something even though you know the process has changed, but you've always done it that way. So this is that availability bias, the easiest way out. Think of where you can get the answer, make sure it's the best answer for the situation. And no matter if you have to dig a little bit deeper to get it, it can sometimes avoid a lot of conflicts in the long run. Hindsight bias. Hindsight is always 2020. You try a new process at work and it fails. All of a sudden, there are 6 people on the team who knew it was going to fail. They didn't tell you that beforehand. They told you after. People tend to believe things were predictable after they've happened. To help with this, take challenges as learning opportunities. So if something didn't turn out quite right, figure out what went well, figure out what to improve for next time. And there's no point in really telling everybody about your clairvoyance at work. I knew this was going to happen. Observer bias. Observer bias is a form of systemic bias. This is where the truth of the situation is lost because of the systemic bias existing the observer to put the situation in an existing frame. That's a lot of words. Let me explain. For example, if you work in customer service, you are very much aware of the Karen bias. You know, that Gen X woman who only wants to talk to the manager? Seeing a woman in that general demographic, oh, here comes a Karen. Oh, there's a label and a judgment. To provide a personal example, I was at a Walmart with my partner. My partner is Indigenous and in a wheelchair. I went to pull the car around to pick up my partner at the doors of Walmart. And when I got there, I found him arguing with a white man who was trying to give him money because he was a crippled Indian. And he needed it more than he did. Observing an Indigenous disabled person in front of a Walmart in Alberta automatically meant that my husband was impoverished and panhandling to this observer. This is systemic bias. Cultural bias. So people tend to interpret things based on their own cultural ideas and values. Ethics of right and wrong, religious beliefs, sexual orientation and marriage rituals, language and linguistic interpretation, all of this comes into that cultural bias. You find these cropping up most often as stereotypes that will influence your decisions and actions towards others. And I could sit here and spend hours and hours just on bias alone. So I'm going to call it there. There are a few things you can do to help keep biases at bay. Number one, recognize biases when they appear in your thinking and in your behavior. Number two, adjust how you react or act based upon your identified bias. Number three, take some bravery, but get support in identifying your biases from a trusted colleague, mentor, or friend. Sometimes it's easier for other people to see where those biases pop up than it is for you to see them yourself. And four, look at processes and policies in the workplace and open conversations how they can be more inclusive. There's a huge focus on DEIB, diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. This is one of those things. For example, automatically expecting everyone to have a university degree when they apply to your workplace biases the company towards hiring white, affluent candidates. When judgment is part of the workplace, there's the potential that conflicts will be bigger than they should have been otherwise. People who feel judged are more likely to exhibit poor conflict management skills or leave an organization. People in a high judgment environment may also become avoidant, and they're less likely to take on work-related risks, like taking on new projects or innovating. And they're less likely to engage with colleagues, leading to less psychological safety and increased attrition rates. So yeah, that's a lot. We're almost in the home stretch here. The definition of gossip. This is one of my favorite slides. Okay. Gossip includes discussing someone else's personal or private affairs without their knowledge and consent. It often includes speculative or unverified information, contributing to the spread of potentially harmful or misleading details. Gossip tends to focus on personal matters, both within the professional and personal relationships, and are typically unrelated to work performance. Gossip feels good. It feels really, really good. And the reason it feels so good is because it triggers neurochemicals of reward when you do it. There's actually a biological thing that says, this feels good, I want more. So any of us who've ever tried to stop smoking or stop drinking, we felt those chemicals. So it's really hard to avoid. People gossip for a variety of reasons: social bonding, social comparison, entertainment, information exchange, warning signals, for example, risks to the social environment, power and control, self affirmation, or soothing your own emotions. Challenge with gossip is that it can create a toxic environment both in the workplace and in personal relationships, eroding trust and damaging connection. As it's important to be mindful of the impact of our words and actions having on both the personal and professional front to foster a culture of respect and professionalism. Believe it or not, gossip is the number one way people manage conflict when conflict management skills are not developed and or the environment does not support healthy disagreement. It's easier to make myself feel better by gossiping than managing the conflict with the person in question. Now, venting is very different. Well, they're not the same thing, and I'll go to the mat on this one. Venting is the expression of personal feelings, frustrations, or concerns to a trusted colleague or friend without the intention of spreading rumors. Venting serves as a cathartic release, allowing individuals to share emotions and seek support in a controlled environment. Venting is typically focused on the individual's own experiences and emotions. If I'm venting, I'm talking about how I think and how I feel related to both work challenges and or personal relationships. Venting is most effective when it's directed towards people who can provide an unbiased perspective. So, gossiping about somebody from work to somebody at work is not unbiased, and support you in finding solutions. Gossip is very rarely solution focused. It should be a focused discussion on moving forward, exploring potential solutions to both personal and professional challenges. And people vent for a variety of reasons. It is that cathartic release. They are looking for an objective perspective. They need unbiased support. It gives you the opportunity for problem solving, helps you navigate conflict resolution, gives you enhanced emotional well being, supports you in maintaining relationships, and supporting your growth. So be very aware when you're talking about other folks. Are you gossiping or are you venting? Are you looking for relief or are you looking for a way forward? How's that looking? There we go. Your key takeaways for today. This is the last slide before I'll shut off. Um, Conflict perception and self-regulation. So key takeaway here, understand that a significant portion, 90%ish, of conflict is influenced by your own biases and historical experiences. Number two, emphasizing the importance of pausing the automatic reactions and evaluating the current situation independently, leading to a more thoughtful and constructive response. Pause that internal dialogue so you can move forward. Effective conflict management strategies. We talked about recognizing that conflict management starts with self-awareness and self-reflection. And the emotions and empathy and conflict resolution, along with your communication style, active listening, there's the word, and a solution-oriented mindset will take you further. We also talked about the social onion diagram and bias awareness. So the diagram is a tool to manage relationships and conflicts across different layers, how it looks from an emotional and social level, and looking at the role of biases and judgment and labeling and conflict, and the importance of recognizing and mitigating the biases for an inclusive and effective dynamic, either in a workplace or other social group. So those are the key takeaways today. What you're seeing up on the screen now is how you can get a hold of me. You've got my email. Follow me on LinkedIn if you like the content. I do post fairly regularly. You've got my website there as well. I encourage you to join the community, get my newsletter. And I do have a secret that now only you will know. In about 48 hours, you'll be able to find my new book on Amazon for pre-order. So you can check out what my book is all about at smartconflictbook.com. That's up on the screen right now. And I have to share, it's on the Amazon. I'm so excited. Anyway, I'm going to stop sharing and I'm going to stop the recording.